So the other day at the Envision Architecture Office Hours meeting, I was talking about how amazing it is that GitHub allows you to download repositories as zip files, even when those repositories are many gigabytes in size. And we were theorizing about whether or not they maintain a zip file in the background at all times. And one of the engineers threw out the idea that maybe they're actually just creating the zip file on the fly and streaming files out of the repository into the zip archive response. And this tickled my curiosity, and I wanted to see if I could generate zip archives on the fly and stream them incrementally to the browser in ColdFusion, or specifically Lucee CFML. So to explore this idea, I have these images from my people page, and what I'm going to do is download each of them in series and then write them to a zip archive output stream, which is then going to be streaming incrementally to the browser. And before we look at some of the details, let's just jump down here and see that we're going to be looping over these image URLs, downloading them. We're going to be writing them to some stuff. We'll see that in a second. And then in between each file, I'm going to sleep for a second and output some content to the server logs. And if we jump over into our browser and we open up our server logs and we start streaming, what we can see is that we are getting data from the server incrementally, and you can see that we are sleeping in between each one of those images. So the data is being streamed to the client incrementally as we are generating that zip file incrementally. And you can see that our zip file is done. So let's go back to the ColdFusion code and look to see how this is working. Jump back to the top. So first, we're just going to reset our output buffer in case we need to get rid of any white space or any kind of content that may have been added to the buffer just from the page processing. We're going to tell the browser to use the content disposition of attachment, which means that it's going to prompt for the file download there. And we're going to give it a file name, people.zip. Now, when we think about our ColdFusion responses, we typically think about text content, whether that's HTML or CFML or JSON, JavaScript object notation. But under the hood, we can actually access the Java servlet object, which, and I know nothing about Java servlets here, but what that does is it gives us access to the actual output stream that the ColdFusion runtime is writing to. And once we have this CFML output stream, what we can do is write to it explicitly, or in the case of this experiment, we're actually going to create a zip output stream and then have the zip output stream write to the CFML output stream on our behalf. So the idea here is we're going to start adding zip entries to our zip output stream. The zip output stream is going to compress or deflate those files on the fly, write them to its own internal output stream, which is actually just piping to the CFML output stream. So we're going to be piping that binary data, archive data, to the ColdFusion response. So we loop over our list of we loop over our list of image URLs. We download them. We make sure that response comes back as binary so that our download here, the file content contains a byte array. And then for each one of these images, we're going to create a zip entry, which is just how it exists within the zip archive. And you can see I'm writing to a directory called streaming zip, a subdirectory called images, and then I'm just getting the file name from the URL itself. We tell the output stream to use this as the next entry, and then you can see we write the binary content, the byte array, to the zip output stream. And what that's going to do is manage the compression of those bytes. And then we're going to close our entry, and at this point we're going to flush the archive content and the CFML output stream content. And when we flush this CFML output stream content, it's actually going to start flushing data to the browser. And this is how we get that incremental delivery of the on-the-fly generation zip archive. And then of course we have our sleep, which we saw earlier. And then once we're done writing entries to the zip output stream, we close the zip output stream, and then we close our CFML, our ColdFusion response, the underlying output stream, so no other data gets written to the client. And there we go. So the idea here is that we want to try and reduce the number of resources that we have to utilize on a particular server. Because really what we could have done is just downloaded all these images, compressed them, added them to a archive file on the server, and then use something like the CF content tag to stream that archive to the client. Stream here in the loose sense, not the strict sense. But when we do that, we have to save all of those images onto disk. Then we have to generate the archive file, which is itself saved to disk. And then we have to stream that file to the client. And then we have to worry about cleaning up all of those intermediary files as well as the archive file on the server. And by creating a zip output stream and piping it directly to the ColdFusion output stream, we don't have to deal with any of those intermediary files, which means that we reduce the amount of data that we have to have on disk or on server at any particular time during this zip archive generation. So I'm not trying to say that this approach is better than that approach. It's different, and I think it would make sense under specific contexts, such as trying to zip and download a 6 gigabyte GitHub repository. You probably don't want to have 6 gigabytes on disk at any one time being added to an archive. So anyway, just a fun exploration, and like I said, the idea of generating a zip file on the fly and streaming it to the client just tickled my curiosity. And it's something I wanted to see if I could do in ColdFusion or Lucee CFML specifically in this context.